Hello, brothers and sisters, and welcome back to another awesome episode of Gothically Yours, Professor M. I'm Professor M, and today I received a very special question from an admirer. Oh, thank you, Cedric. Let's find out what it says here. Greeting, Professor. Love the program. You are awesome. Love your makeup tutorials. I wanted to know if you remember the 90s goth scene and what was it like? Valentine Obscura. Now, I'm not sure if it's Valentine or Valentine, but regardless, I know that it is a who sent that to me, and today I will be answering a very special question. Join us. List of things that I wanted to share about that whole 90s scene. For those who don't know, as an elder goth, I'm now in my 50s. Oh, stop that! Every time I say that, the number appears above my head. Stop, go away, please. Anyways, we're going to talk a little bit about the 90s when I was 18. Ah, that's much better. I know that there are a lot of baby bats out there just dying to know about that time. The 1990s were an amazing, amazing, amazing time, and I'm just so glad to have been a part of it, and within an era that was so vibrant. I have to share with you where it all began. My story begins in Western New England, and I received a scholarship to go to design school. How wonderful. And my goth mom supported me, and my dad took me all the way out to Ohio. During that time, I had found a mysterious and wonderful goth subculture group of people within Ohio. And there was just this alternative world that was blossoming. Now, you got to remember, this is the type of era where there was no MP3s, there was no all this USB stuff. We either had LPs or CDs, and that was it. So if you wanted goth music, per se, you had to go to very obscure places to get it. And my best friend, goth brother Thomas, took me all the way to Pittsburgh, downtown Pittsburgh, as he would say, and he took me to a very unique and wonderful shop that just sold alternative music. This was the days and the time when you couldn't just go to the interweb and pull up something or snippety-snap and push a button and hear the music or a sampleation or something like that. It was obscure. The goth subcultural group was very, very, very tiny, I would have to say. It was a much smaller, tighter knit group, and it wasn't as watered down as today's modern technology has spread it and used it and used the word hashtag goth this, hashtag goth that. It was more deeper. So the 90s were concentrated, and we could not get just anything off the internet and run the credit card type of thing like this. You would have to have a paper catalog, and you would have to write a check. Probably some baby bats out there and say, what is a check? I know you're not that young. Checks still exist today. I know you still write them, still bounce them, don't you? Right, Cedric? You're enjoying this as much as I am. But I wrote down a list of things that I wanted to share over here. We had to go to paper catalogs to get music. And this was the era of Anne Rice, the arisal of the vampire. So the 1990s and the goth scene, I would have to say, was the arrival of the vampire. And if you were a Victorian goth like I am, you actually said goodbye to 1888 and said hello to 1901, which was the era of the Edwardian. There was a lot of Edwardian Goth, and there was another arisal. So that if you were coming out of Victorian Goth, you probably have tried on Edwardian Goth. Now, what is Edwardian Goth? Well, it's a much smaller shaft. Victorian Goth is a very massive family, and it's broken into three different sections. We have got the early Goth period, the mid-Goth period, and the late Goth period, which I am, is my specialty. And then there was a generational new foundation after it called the Edwardian. And the Edwardian was where King Edward picks up when Queen Victoria passes away. It's a much shorter period of time. However, a lot of the men were wearing a thing called the Norse skipper, and it was a very, very, very sharp, here I'll demonstrate for you. It looked like this. It was a small, crafty beard on the bottom of the chin. Looked like that, okay? And that was an Edwardian style thing. It was a lot of canes, there was a lot of feathers, there was a lot of pearls, there was a lot of beads. We saw a mixture of vampirism and this Edwardian thing. And what I brought in today is one of my vampire cloaks with me to show what it would look like. This is a velvet vampire. Where is the hood? The hood is over here somewhere, but I'll put this on later. I want to show you what this looked like. But it has these beautiful straps. It's all made of velvet. Oh, this is the hood over here. But if you were a goth at this time, during the 90s, deeply into vampires, you saw it everywhere. I loved it. So, and we have Anne Rice to thank, our beloved Saint Anne. Thank you, Anne, for bringing those very special characters, Lestat and Lewis, into our lives, and creating a new element to the Goth subculture because it was expanding. Now let me go on a little bit. To find music at this time, you'd have to go either to a very special record shop. We were going to a record shop called Magnolia Thunderpussies. It was in Columbus, Ohio. And it had a pretty good alternative scene. It was filled with patchouli and oils and all kinds of exotic posters and cards and buttons and beads and all kinds of things you could just, glamour yourself over with. It was a gothic wonderland, and it had a really great section of alternative. But Thomas took me to Pittsburgh, and he showed me another underground record shop that was 4 times in alternative composition of LPs and CDs, and this was the beginning of the era of the CD. So it was, LPs were still hot, tapes were still hot. I remember digging through thousands and thousands of records and names, obscure names from bands from Germany and England and France and places I've never heard, bands I've never heard of, and new alternative. I think my hands were just pitch black from the dust from going through all the records. But let me go on a little bit more. But there was still the emergence of, the goth culture of The Cure, Sisters of Mercy, Bauhaus was there. All the staples were there, plus the emergence of industrial. Now, for those who don't know, industrial is this cutting edge pounding sound. Now, when you say the word industrial, I would probably say, if you know the band 9 Inch Nails, which is Trent Reznor, he is I would probably say, the most iconic of all the industrial singers. But he is not goth. He dresses dark. He has a lot of dark aesthetics. He even listened to The Cure when he was working all through his art years, doing stuff, whatever he did for Disneyland or whatever. But he had devised a new form of shaft of music, and that overlays into the spectrum of goth. So you have industrial goth, and there's all kinds of bands that came out of that. we were listening to a hodgepodge of different materials, but I do remember the Nine Inch Nails era overlapping in the 1990s. And I don't remember because it was kind of a fuzzy thing. I went to Tom took me to Red Hot Chili Peppers. I saw the Ramones for the last time before they exited off of the touring. But I can still hear the pounding music of Nine Inch Nails in my head. Bow down before the one you serve. You're going to get what you deserve. It's a great time, the 90s. Wow. The band was been caught stealing once when I was 5. I think of that moment. The goth scene was dark. Where I was and where we were going to different clubs was dark. And we went to one club. I remember the name was called Mean Mr. Mustard's. The whole entire goth night was black. There were black tables, black. Everything was, it was hard to find your way in there. And the bathrooms, I won't even talk about the bathrooms. It was just a cave. But we were so entranced by the mysterious and wonderfulness of all the other gothic people that were coming together. It created a wonderland, a fantasy world, a night that you didn't want to end, didn't want to go out. And when you exited these clubs, you had the penetrating smell of patchouli, cloves, different types of alternative ambrose oils, and the cigarette smell. It was just an amazing time. I had hundreds of CDs when I was in my teens. Black lipstick was one of the most coveted objects you could own during the 80s and 90s. It became a little bit more easily accessible during the 90s, but during the 80s, it was a must-have in your wardrobe. In the 90s, I would probably say for women, it was corsets, leather corsets, bone lace corsets. I remember the fashion fusing with vampire and industrial and this alternative scene. We came out of a club one night, and I remember sitting in the car, and I turned my head, fully dressed, of course, turned my head, and I saw this one guy on the sidewalk, and I said, "Does your mother know you dress like that?" I was so taken by I always thought I was surrounded by alternativeness, but when you got out of that sphere and saw how deep alternative could really go, it just, I remember him wearing in these boots, like boots up to his knees. He had on fishnet pantyhose or tights or something with rips in them. I don't know if it was a pair of shorts or a skirt. He was wearing ripped shirts, all his face, tattoos, something, his hair was done up. It was incredible. It was incredible. The 90s was just, oh my gosh, we need more of that now. Let's dip back into it. Pull it back in. Let's go back. Moving right along, going back to the goth club scene, we took a lot of time to get ready. It took hours and hours and hours and hours to get ready. It still does for me. I mean, I gotta, when I pick out an outfit, I gotta make sure that it is what I want to wear that night. I want to feel comfortable. I want to go out and feel stylish and, incredibly, into myself that night. You want to feel good, right, Cedric? I mean, where's David tonight? Anyways, he must be out. There is something about the 90s that we had. There was all kinds of new music bands that were erupting all around us. There was emergence of a scene that was still, even though it was paper, you had to go out and still find things, and I loved it. It wasn't so instant. It wasn't so clickety-click. It was a search, and when you got the album or LP, you totally loved it because it took so long to get it. waiting weeks to get something through the mail or mail order. There was still a lot of mail order. And I'm not talking about Amazon. I'm talking about for some obscure place out in Wisconsin or Michigan or Minnesota or something like that, some record shop you've never heard of, you got to get something from there. I think this was the first time that I had heard of the Frozen Autumn at the time, about the 90s. There was other bands that were erupting at that time, but it took us a long time to get ready. I'm going to actually check myself to see how ready I am. Oh. Do you like this makeup I put on today? It took me a while to put this on today. I wanted that aesthetic look, and it's going to be so awesome because we are 2 weeks away from our favorite holiday, which is Halloween. I also wrote down here, I loved dancing with strangers. There is nothing more incredible about going to a club and dancing with strangers. I've been to several clubs, not only in the Midwest, but in New England. And I love dancing with strangers. I do have one thing to share, though. I was dancing too close to one goth girl, and I did not know that she was with another group of girls. I don't want to say the word coven, but I was getting, I guess, I was trying to be goth friendly, how do you say, and I was grabbed and I was just thrown against the wall. That was a typical thing. It was very rare, but it was a typical thing that you have a space. And this was not the stuff that happened during the 80s. The 80s goth scene, the 80s goth club scene was not, you wouldn't do that. But in the 90s, there was more gatekeeping. There was more stricter rules. There were more, how goth are you? Can you prove your gothiness? How much was your music knowledge? How many different goth movies did you know? Did you know them by heart? All of these things popped up in the 90s that we didn't have in the 80s. In the early 80s, I'm talking about 82, 83, like this, goth was colorful. Goth was absolutely mind-bending colorful. We had so much color at that time. There was not just black and white, but I mean, there was a lot of color. People used different shades of color in because we were transforming, we were moving, we were evolving as a subculture into this. But in the early 80s, you saw this. And you know who talks about this? The random goth couple, Connor and Lynn. Talk about that in one of their videos. The early 80s were filled with color. And then by the 90s, we got more into the Morticia Addams mopey scene. Trad goth became more elevated. We saw more darkness and more transitioning to the three elemental colors, red, black, and white, which is the color triad that most of us stick to, even to this day. For those of us who don't wear white, we wear silver instead, and it's amazing that I just seem to have that on today. Dancing with strangers, how wonderful that was. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about the music core and the grand soul of releasing it. The time of the goth era of the 90s was one before the whole internet age and the whole cell phone age. So we were still using telephones to make those phone calls to our alternative friends. Ding-a-ling-a-ling. Wow, what an era. I remember candles on tables, people drinking absinthe, all the different types of oils. My friend Tom and his wife Beth took me to a thing called the Renaissance Fair. We dressed fairly dark that day, and I don't know how they even let us into the gates, but I clearly remember picking up all types of incenses and oils, and I went around to all the people that were alchemists at the Renaissance Fair to discover some new material to wear. It's something no one had, you know. So I did have a collection of incenses for over 20 years. And then one day I opened the bottle and realized that the smell had completely dissipated from them. They were just sticks. The question that came up, what was the 90s like? Well, Valentine, it's like a tunnel that goes under one's life. You don't really know that it's happening. It's just happening all around you. And after it's done, in 1999, when I was, I think it was 28 years old, 27, 28 years old, at that time, you look back and go, that was the 90s. You know, and we were so revved up about the 2000s, you know. So it's like a tunnel that just it goes under your life. So to say what was the 90s goth scene like was, it's just, I'm pulling up memories of the goth clubs that I had gone to and the concert I had gone to and the music and the smells and those types of things that you remember. I want to share with you what I am going to be sharing. Don't miss my Halloween special coming up in 2 weeks. I'll be having a Halloween Professor M Halloween special, one that you shouldn't miss. I think it's now time for me to put on my vampire cloak. Let's stop. And now I wanted to demonstrate this. I love this look. I've got to wear this more often. Problem is, you can't go to a club and dance with this stuff. It's just not virtually possible. But I have this beautiful, beautiful cape that I have. If you're looking for good capes, you can have them custom designed. They can run you anywhere from the low end of $60 all the way up to, say, several hundred, depending on what type of fabric you're using or whatever you have in your collection, or how badly you want to have something that is more and more and more darker. But this is one of the vampire cape styles that came out during the night. Beautiful. It is a velvet, soft, it's very lightweight, it's gorgeous, and I've got 3 of them in my collection. For the baby bats that are out there looking for this material, it is still available online. I have seen several different companies that do sell capes. A lot of them can be found through specialty marketplaces. I had saw someone who still makes them on Etsy once, but I think the starting price was about $60 American. What do you think? Do you like what you see? Do you see what you like? Good. I will continue the rest of my conversation. I just kept the cape on. Clackety clack. There's always time for tea. I hope that you've enjoyed this very special episode of Gothically Yours. And if you do have any questions about anything, please leave me a comment down below. There's a 99.99% chance I will write you back. And don't forget my Halloween special that's coming up in 2 weeks. I hope you've enjoyed this very special episode. And as always, Gothically Yours, Professor